Does anyone know the time? Most of us do, right? Whether it's on our smartphone, our watch, a clock, or we could be listening out for the 2 o'clock gong. Whatever the case, people know the time. These days, time is fundamental in our society. Kids need to go to school on time and get to class on time, and adults might have to start work on time or have meetings they need to be at on time. All this need to know the time leads to demand in timekeeping services, mostly a demand for watches. Did you know over 1 billion watches are made every year? That's 30 watches every time yours ticks. 30 watches, 30 watches, 30 watches, and another 30 watches. To understand how all these watches are created, we need to rewind time itself. My name is Digby, and if you haven't already guessed, my quest is about repairing watches. Timekeeping has an incredible history, dating back to the first mechanical clocks that surfaced during the late 13th and early 14th centuries. Following these large and complex mechanisms, pocket watches made their mark in the 1500s, and wristwatches followed soon after, becoming the basis on which all further watch design was built on. Until the mid-20th century, watches were powered by winding a mainspring. The final transformation in timekeeping history occurred when watch brand Seiko unveiled the Astron 35 SQ, the world's first quartz watch. The development of this quartz watch changed it all, causing the quartz revolution or the quartz crisis, depending on how you look at it. Before the development of these quartz watches, mainly Swiss manufacturers dominated the industry, creating intricate automatic and manual movements. Creating these movements required an incredible amount of skill and expertise, undertaken by highly trained individuals. Quartz simplified the creation of watches by replacing complex mechanisms with electronics. This made watches more affordable and more accurate, but it also came at a price. Watches became less of an antique artifact to be passed down generations, and instead became more of a product of fast fashion. These days, people can easily and cheaply buy a fake Rolex, but inevitably it goes out of fashion or breaks. This is where my quest comes in. But before we get to that, how did I come up with such a distinctive and unique idea anyway? Well, before my quest had even begun, I had many questions about watches. What's going on behind that dial? How does it tell the time accurately? How does it tick? Perhaps it was these questions, along with my love for the aesthetics of watches, that drove my love of watches and led to my quest. So how does it tick? The most obvious way for me to find out was to look inside the back of a watch, with my own tools, my own eyes, and my own watches. From there, maybe I could begin to attempt fixing them. So I started off by putting out a request to the Green School community, asking for broken and/or unused watches. I then expanded my sphere a little wider, reaching out to friends and family in Australia. I also asked if anyone had any interest or experience in the field of horology, the study of watches. One parent, thanks Panda, told me a bit about what I needed: a watch repair kit, a magnifying glass, a mat, and a container to put the tiny pieces in. Thankfully, I didn't have to go to Switzerland. Actually, that could have been fun. But nevertheless, like most things in Bali, I was able to order it pretty easily online. I put a box in the bridge, and slowly watches came my way. I was surprised at the sheer amount of donations I received. 22 in total. Some were cheap, some were good quality, most had seen better days, but each and every one caught my attention in one way or another. After all, I had never seen inside a watch before. I set up a workstation at home on my desk and laid my tools on the mat. As a guide to repairing the many watches I received, I did some research. It turns out there are many people out there who love watches, and some very handy videos to guide me through the process. The first watch that came my way was this one. Fortunately, it was a 3-hand watch with no date. It had a diamond circumference, so I knew it had to be fake. This made me feel a little bit better about opening it, as I was a bit nervous. From the very first attempt, some of these watches seemed impossible to get into. There were no visible screws or bolts, but instead these watches had what was called a pop-off back. Like the name suggests, you use a small knife, apply a bit of upward pressure, and pop, off comes the back. What I very quickly noticed is that watches with pop-off backs tended to be fake and or cheap. What's more, I believe they are designed like this so that people don't look inside them. They buy new ones instead. From the next 3 watches I opened, I was constantly surprised at just how small the electronics were behind the dial. This, of course, is due to the fact that these watches were battery-powered or quartz watches, meaning there was no need for the mechanisms of an old-style watch. While these watches could have looked very different on the outside, on the inside they looked almost identical. The 4th watch I got was probably the first of notable quality. I realized that the reason it had stopped working was not because of a battery issue, rather because of rust within the cogs. I was really excited to repair this watch and return it to the owner. Unfortunately, while I was deconstructing the watch to repair the pieces, a piece went missing. This was a mistake and I regret it greatly, but it was also a learning experience. After losing this piece, I began to document each piece as it came out of the watch. I also began videoing my progress so that I could play the video in reverse to put it back together. Apologies to Matt Soul, who gave me the watch, but also thank you for the learning experience. Later, I noticed my digital watch had begun to black out. I realized a reason that this was probably a battery issue. I got quite surprised when I opened the back of the watch and found very detailed instructions on how to change the battery. I think this is there for people in the shop to easily replace the battery after it has been bought. While digital watches aren't necessarily a sustainable option, this is an encouraging sign, as it means the manufacturers have thought about the longevity of the watch. Over the next 3 weeks, I opened 13 watches, and during the process, I got inspired by the Hublot Big Bang Unicorn Espresso Origin. Its band is made from a mixture of recycled rubber and coffee grounds, and the watch itself is made from 100% recycled aluminium, of which 28% came from the same pods that held the coffee grounds. Admittedly, this watch is a little out of my price range, costing almost $25,000 US. Nevertheless, I decided to see what else was going on in the world of watches in terms of sustainability. In the end, I emailed 41 individual brands, but what really astonished me is out of the 41 brands I emailed, 27 didn't respond at all, 8 responded but didn't answer my questions, 2 just emailed back and said to check their website, and only 2 actually answered my questions. One of the companies that did respond was Hublot. They told me about various operational sustainable measures, but they also emphasized the fact that a mechanical watch without the need for batteries is by definition sustainable through time. This brings me to something else unexpected that happened towards the end of my quest. I mentioned my quest project to my grandparents, and they very, very generously donated me 5 proper mechanical watches, i.e. they didn't need a battery. When I opened the back of these watches, I saw what a real watch was supposed to look like on the inside. These watches were up to 58 years old. One of them had my grandma's name and the year, 1966, etched on the back. The other had my grandfather's address from when he was 19 years old. Amazingly, all of these watches had at least 15 rubies inside them, which indicate quality. These were true mechanical masterpieces, and to my complete surprise, all I needed to do to get them ticking again was to wind them up. I discovered many more intriguing things while doing my quest. However, my time with you is almost up. This quest helped open my eyes to the intricate mechanics in most of our everyday watches. If a watch stops working, we tend to throw it away and buy a new one. But in fact, many of the watches I received were presumed broken, but in fact all they needed was a simple battery change. I had to ask myself, what does this mean for the rest of the watches out there? What does this mean for the planet? I suggest you do the same. My advice to you is stop buying fake Rolexes. Like most things, think long term. Try finding a quality watch in a second-hand store. And remember, mechanical timepieces have kept ticking for generations. My grandparents' watches did, and yours could too. Lastly, this quest has been a long and wonderful journey, and I would like to thank everyone who helped me through the highs and lows during it. First of all, I would like to thank all the people who so generously donated me watches. After all, without them, this quest never would have happened. I would also like to shout out a big thanks to my mom, dad, and brother, and also all my friends for supporting me during this project. Another big thanks to Ibu Angie, Ibu Laura, Pak Andy, and Ibu Vanthia, and all the other quest teachers who helped and guided me through this project. Lastly, I would like to thank you, the audience, for taking your time out of this day to come and watch my speech. Thank you.